Good evening, I'm Bakhtiar Sanov and you are watching A News. Let's see the top stories shaping our world. The United States and China continue talks on a tariff truce in Stockholm. At least 17 people were killed and dozens injured after Russian forces struck a prison in Ukraine. Record-breaking heat has sparked wildfires across several countries in Europe. The top U.S. and Chinese economic officials arrived on Tuesday at Rosenbad government offices in Stockholm to resume talks. The teams are conducting their latest bilateral round of trade negotiations after previous meetings in London and Geneva. Talks began on Monday to try to tackle long-standing economic disputes with the aim to extend a truce and keeping higher tariffs at bay. China is facing a 12th August deadline to reach a reasonable tariff agreement with President Donald Trump's administration. It follows Beijing and Washington, who both reached preliminary deals in May and June, putting an end to weeks of escalating tit-for-tat tariffs. Nick Harper has more on these talks from Washington.
Well, this is the third round of official talks between the two economic powerhouses since US President Donald Trump earlier this year raised tariffs on Chinese imports to triple-digit levels. The primary goal of this set of talks is to try and extend a fragile trade truce that's due to expire on August the 12th. The negotiations come after a week in which we've seen the Trump administration announce deals with some of the US's biggest trading partners. That includes a deal with Japan last week and over the weekend with the European Union. Also over the weekend, President Trump said that a deal with China was very close without providing any specific details. And on Monday, he said he'd love to see China open up their country to US trade. But the US Trade Representative, Jameson Greer, the man who is involved in the finer discussions and negotiations, has played down expectations. He said on Monday that he did not expect some kind of enormous breakthrough during these talks in Sweden. Instead, he told Business Channel, CNBC, that he expects the meeting to result in continued monitoring of the agreement thus far and making sure that key critical minerals are flowing between the parties and setting the groundwork for enhanced trade and balanced trade going forward. He also noted that these talks were the third such meeting in the past 3 months. The first two meetings in Geneva and London in many ways were more about de-escalation, reducing the tensions between Washington and Beijing. We were told that this third round was going to deal with some of the nitty-gritty, the real details of the discussions and the things that both sides were trying to agree on. Greer, though, has said just the fact that the US and China are talking in a more positive way is in itself what he called a good sign. Trade analysts suggest that we're likely to see another 90-day extension of the tariff truce that was agreed back in May. That will probably be the big outcome in Sweden during these discussions, another opportunity for both parties to spend more time really trying to work out what they want out of this agreement, that 90-day pause giving them an opportunity to do so. And it could also facilitate planning for a potential meeting between President Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping later this year. Nick Harper for A News in Washington, D.C.
Now we turn to a controversial development shaking European politics and trade policy. France's Prime Minister has sharply criticized the new trade agreement framework between the European Union and the United States, calling it a dark day for Europe. While some European leaders have welcomed the framework, which includes a 15% tariff on most EU imports into the United States, others argue that it undermines Europe's economic interests and negotiating power. To discuss this, I'm joined by Jorge Costa Oliveira, an international business consultant, speaking to us from Lisbon, Portugal. Mr. Oliveira, welcome to the program.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Mr. Oliveira, France's Prime Minister has called this a dark day for Europe. From your perspective, why is this trade agreement framework so controversial?
Well, it's controversial for a number of reasons. The main one is because in comparison with the UK agreement, it's not a great agreement. And in second place, because it reflects the fragility that Europe has regarding the United States. So I think in the future, when we look at this in 5-10 years' time, we'll look at this as the moment, the bottom moment, where Europe realized that it needed to be strategically autonomous vis-a-vis the United States. Otherwise, agreements like this sound somewhat humiliating. Although the agreement, to some extent, is only a pre-agreement, and some of what is mentioned by Trump clearly cannot be implemented. But we can go there later.
But Mr. Oliveira, some EU leaders have welcomed the agreement. What do you think is driving this divide among European countries regarding the deal?
Well, the business community is telling all the European leaders that they need more clarity and stability as regards the internationalization of their business. And this is the main drive for the European Commission to accept 15%. So, and this is the reason why also many European leaders are saying that it is better to have 15% in certainty than not to have certainty at all. Let's not forget that the only economic bloc where it is necessary for the Congress or the Parliament to ratify or confirm what the executive branch has negotiated, it's not only the US. In the European Union, it will be necessary to confirm such a trade deal, at least with the European Parliament, and most likely with the most relevant European nations. So it is, even if Europe is divided now, and if it loses leverage in terms of negotiations, it does not mean that any agreement, and currently we only have a pre-agreement, is going to pass the European Parliament. And that's what is complicated in the current division in Europe.
So France is known for its strong protectionist stance on trade. Do you believe this criticism is largely political, or are there real economic concerns for countries like France?
Well, in France, you can never... It depends on the sectors.
Yes.
In France, probably because members of the French Parliament by constituencies where farmers are decisive voters, they pay a lot of attention to whatever happens in the agricultural field. And the farmers from France, and not only, but France is a good example, have been fighting fiercely against an agreement with Mercosur, precisely because it would allow farming products coming from South America at much more competitive prices, and they are afraid of losing market quotas and business in Europe. So now the fear for sure is the same vis-a-vis the American farmers. So that alone would be enough for the French government and the French president to have many doubts on what has to be on this kind of pre-agreement. But again, it is important to remember this is a pre-agreement or a framework agreement. So part of the pressure that we are seeing now, and that inevitably we'll see also on the American side, is regards the necessary, or regards the fact that it is still necessary to negotiate in detail a lot of issues regarding a lot of products and sectors. There's a reason why trade agreements, even between small countries, take 2 years to negotiate. So this idea that in 15 days Trump sent a letter and von der Leyen said, okay, not this, but like that, and we'll buy more this and more that, frankly, it's disturbing because it's oversimplistic.
So looking ahead, what steps could the EU take to ensure its economic interests are protected as the trade framework moves forward a final agreement?
Yeah, to be honest, this is going to be an ongoing process, but the most disturbing thing, in my opinion, it's not even that Europe has agreed on 15% and the UK got 10%. And the most disturbing is the fact that there are numbers referred. For instance, the number referred for the purchase by Europe of LNG from the US, 250 billion a year for 3 years. It's completely ridiculous. Reuters already made a statement in that regard. I mean, anyone that does a calculation, even if you include some more look, LNG, Europe last year bought less than 22 billion in LNG from the US. Even if you add some other energy for fuel, for instance, that increases the number by 11 billion. It is completely unrealistic. That is the kind of number that for sure came out of Trump's head, even without consulting many people, I suspect, as is usual. And von der Leyen went along with it. In the same sense, I think we are seeing the repetition now from Europe of the posture that China had in the agreement, in the trade agreement with China in 2017. And the idea was, okay, let's make him happy. Let's guarantee that the trade flow goes on. And in due time, when there are political conditions that allow us that, which in the US means after the midterm elections, we'll review this. And in the meantime, we are going to spend a lot of time negotiating in detail a real trade agreement. So I think this is about gaining time. But the way that von der Leyen handled this was, if understandable, not brilliant. And the fact that the president and prime minister of France and Germany are against it in no uncertain terms means that there's going to be a big political storm in Europe regarding the European Commission.
George Costa Oliveira, thank you for sharing your insights with us today. We appreciate your expertise and perspective on this critical issue. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
A looming U.S. tariff hike could squeeze Brazil's vital orange juice industry. Farmers say the consequences could be devastating if urgent action isn't taken.
Brazil's orange juice industry is under threat as US President Donald Trump prepares to slap a 50% tariff on Brazilian products starting August the 1st. Growers like Luiz Antonio Dutra in Rio de Janeiro fear their world-famous orange juice could vanish from global shelves.
They need to dialogue, find a way as they also depend on us, on our product.
President Donald Trump's proposed 50% tariff on Brazil could devastate the country's citrus belt. Farmers are facing plummeting prices, slowed harvests, disrupted schedules, and the possibility of leaving fruit to rot due to escalating trade tensions. Brazil supplies 80% of the world's orange juice. Just over half of that goes to the US. But with the US market under threat, farmers are bracing for big losses.
What I imagine is that we might lose our juice, which they say is one of the world's best.
Grower Delcio Capistrano says that Brazil's president must act fast.
Our president has to confront Donald Trump, talk to him, because there's no point in talking here and there. It won't solve anything.
With prices plummeting and costs rising, Capistrano warns that many could be pushed out of business.
You can't work with that price. If they bring them to the state of Rio, the price of our oranges will drop even further.
If no deal is reached, farmers says the juice could stop flowing on both sides of the equator.
At least 4 people have been killed, including a police officer, after a gunman opened fire inside a Midtown Manhattan office building. New York police say the suspect has been confirmed as neutralized, and investigations are ongoing.
In the heart of New York City, multiple people were shot inside a Manhattan skyscraper that houses major financial firms and the National Football League headquarters. Police rushed to the Park Avenue office tower on Monday evening after a gunman opened fire inside. Authorities say at least 4 people were killed, including a New York Police Department officer. Officials have named the suspect as 27-year-old Shane Tamura, a Nevada resident who died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound, according to authorities.
According to our law enforcement partners in Las Vegas, Mr. Tamura has a documented mental health history. His motives are still under investigation, and we are working to understand why he targeted this particular location.
Just steps from the city's financial core, many residents and workers struggled to come to terms with the violence that unfolded.
It's awful and devastating, and there frankly is nothing else to think but why couldn't this have been prevented? Why was this a civilized get time? like kind of systems calamities that allowed this to happen and aren't Middle East.
I just feel less safe. You feel it, and, you know. I don't know. Like I used to feel a lot safer, more comfortable, just being in the area, being in the neighborhood, and I don't anymore. Honestly, I really don't.
Speaking just hours after the attack, New York City Mayor Eric Adams acknowledged the wider toll of gun violence and the pain facing the victims' families.
Gun violence has scarred so many neighbors and ripped apart too many families across this entire country. And we will continue the fight to do all we can to protect our city. But tonight we mourn for those who were killed. And we pray for the families as they go through this painful moment.
Democratic mayoral candidate Zoran Mamdani says he was heartbroken on social media platform X, expressing solidarity with the victims and gratitude to the first responders. Investigators are now combing the scene for answers.
At least 17 people were killed and dozens injured after Russian forces struck a prison in Ukraine's Zaporizhia region. Overnight strikes hit a penal colony, destroying prison buildings and damaging nearby homes, Regional Governor Ivan Fedorov said. He stated Russian forces used 8 high-explosive aerial bombs in the attack. Ukraine's government has condemned the attack as a war crime. There has been no immediate response from Moscow. A Russian missile strike has killed 3 people in the city of Kamyansky in Ukraine's Dnipropetrovsk region. One of the victims was a 23-year-old pregnant woman, according to President Volodymyr Zelensky. The strike damaged 2 residential buildings and the main hospital for Kamyansky and the wider region. Local authorities say the hospital's maternity ward was among the areas hit. Donald Trump has given Russia 12 days to move toward ending the war in Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky welcomed the pressure, but many Ukrainians remain doubtful.
U.S. President Donald Trump on Monday gave Russia 10 to 12 days to make progress on ending the war in Ukraine, cutting short the 50-day deadline he had set earlier this month. Speaking in Scotland, Trump said he was disappointed in Russian President Vladimir Putin and warned of sanctions and tariffs on both Russia and its trading partners.
I'm not so interested in talking anymore. He talks, we have such nice conversations, such respectful and nice conversations, and then people die the following night with a missile going into a town and hitting, recently I guess the nursing home, but they hit other things. Whatever they hit, people die.
In Kyiv, President Volodymyr Zelensky praised Trump's remarks and stressed that strong sanctions remain essential for peace.
We have repeatedly said, and all our partners know, that sanctions are a key element. Russia pays attention to sanctions, to such losses. Peace through strength is possible.
But public opinion in Ukraine is far more cautious. Many say they've heard similar promises before and don't believe a quick deal with Russia is possible.
Putin will, as usual, come up with something and make some promises. Trump will think he's a good guy and then they'll have a very good conversation. Then all of a sudden missiles will fly towards us. This is already some kind of algorithm. I don't know what has to happen to break this pattern.
Some citizens argue that what Ukraine truly needs is not more deadlines, but sustained military aid. Still, others believe the shortened deadline is a strategic warning to Moscow.
Trump intended to reduce the use of force, but Putin is using this time to commit acts of lawlessness. That's why Trump can reduce the deadline to demonstrate that he wants to see peace efforts, not escalation. That's why Trump started decreasing the deadline, to hint to Putin that he is looking for peace and not playing on his side.
Meanwhile, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Moscow had taken note of President Trump's shortened deadline for a ceasefire in Ukraine. Peskov added there would be no emotional reaction to Trump's remarks, warning that external pressure or sanctions would not bring about a resolution and that any such moves would only complicate dialogue.
U.S. President Donald Trump has contradicted Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, saying there is real starvation in Gaza. Speaking during a visit to Scotland, Trump said more must be done to deliver food and humanitarian aid. Speaking alongside UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, Donald Trump said images of hungry children in Gaza show the situation is dire. We are going to set up food centers with no fences and boundaries to ease access, he said, pledging U.S. support for food and sanitation aid. But Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejected the claims, insisting there is no starvation in Gaza and vowing to continue the fight against Hamas. With more on the recent developments surrounding the European continent, its connectivity and budget spending is our very own Anita Sharma.
Welcome to This Day in Europe, where the EU Transport Commissioner warns Europe is not ready on the defense front in the event of a war with Russia. Apostolos Tsikostas says Europe's road, rail, and bridge networks cannot handle rapid military deployment given the narrow tunnels, weak bridges, and border bureaucracy. Those impediments, he tells the Financial Times, make NATO deployments from Western to Eastern Europe slow and fragile and could take weeks or months. The transport chief says the EU will undertake a €17 billion overhaul that targets 500 key infrastructure projects. Many are aligned with NATO's 4 designated military mobility corridors. Projects include upgrading or replacing bridges, widening tunnels, and cutting red tape to prevent military convoys getting stuck in customs delays. Back in June, when we attended the NATO summit in The Hague, Netherlands, Secretary General Mark Rutte asked EU members to hike defense spending to 5% of GDP by 2035, with 1.5% earmarked for infrastructure and logistics. The Transport Commissioner says the mobility program complements that pledge and is a critical undertaking. He states that Europe cannot defend itself successfully without a strong transport plan that entails moving forces quickly across borders. Recently on A News, we reported on the port of Rotterdam in Netherlands, which is Europe's largest seaport with about 436 million tons of annual freight. Well, military preparations are currently underway in response to NATO guidance. Dedicated berths are reserved for NATO military cargo vessels docking several times a year. There is close coordination as well with the Port of Antwerp in Belgium to share capacity and manage shipments from the U.S., UK, or Canada, and annual amphibious military exercises are being conducted with vessels moored for extended periods. Now, the EU is engaged in a rearmament plan worth up to €800 billion after demands from U.S. President Donald Trump to become more self-sufficient. General warnings from Poland and NATO leaders predict potential threats from Russia by 2030, underscoring the urgency of readiness. There are key hurdles to overcome, though. The €17 billion military mobility plan still needs approval under the EU's 2028 to 2034 budget, and member states could reduce the pledged amount amid fiscal disputes. Also, port upgrades such as designating dual-use infrastructure, streamlining customs, and scheduling logistics are underway, but demand coordination across government, private sector, and NATO. Officials are sounding a wake-up call that without modern infrastructure, from roads and rails to ports like Rotterdam, forces or equipment cannot move swiftly in a potential crisis with Russia. It seems Europe is finally treating mobility infrastructure as frontline defense assets. However, with timelines compressed, execution and political motivation will determine whether these plans can indeed come to fruition. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands. Now back to you.
French defense company Naval Group is investigating claims of a major cyber attack targeting sensitive data on its nuclear submarines. Hackers say they have already leaked classified files online and are threatening to release more if their demands are not met.
French shipbuilding giant Naval Group is investigating a potential cyber attack after hackers claim to have stolen top-secret classified data on the country's nuclear submarines. The state-owned company, which builds France's Barracuda-class nuclear-powered submarines and aircraft carriers, said it had immediately launched technical investigations following threats to publish files on the dark web. Hackers, who have already released about 30 gigabytes of documents allegedly containing submarine weapon system source codes, have given Naval Group 72 hours to respond. The company, however, denies any confirmed breach, calling the incident a reputational attack. Naval Group has noticed being the target of a reputational attack with the claim of a cyber malice act. At this stage, no intrusion into our IT environments has been detected, and there has been no impact on our activities, a spokesperson stated. The alleged hack comes amid a surge of cyber attacks targeting critical infrastructure globally. Naval Group, which employs over 15,000 people and reported revenues of 4.4 billion euros, is majority owned by the French government, with defence giant Thales holding the remaining stake.
Record-breaking heat has sparked wildfires across several countries, putting firefighters and emergency teams under intense pressure.
Wildfires have been a persistent threat across southern Europe and surrounding regions, with countries facing worsening conditions each year due to rising temperatures and drought. Spain and Portugal have previously joined forces, coordinating resources and training to tackle these fires more effectively as their fire seasons grow longer and more intense. In Spain, a large wildfire near El Arenal town in the central province of Avila has burned more than 500 hectares of forest. More than 200 firefighters, supported by air tankers, have been battling the blaze amid steep and rugged terrain. Residents from nearby Montbeltran were evacuated as a precaution, but were allowed to return home after conditions improved. Authorities remain on high alert as strong winds continue to threaten the area. Meanwhile, in Portugal, over 1,300 firefighters backed by water-bombing planes are fighting 3 major wildfires in the central and northern regions. In the Arauca area, popular for its natural beauty, residents were evacuated and hiking trails closed due to the advancing flames. The fires come amid a prolonged dry spell and intense heat wave that has left forests bone dry and highly flammable. Spain has also sent aerial support to help Portugal control flames in border areas. Greece has also faced multiple blazes recently, straining firefighting teams amid soaring summer heat. A recent blaze near Athens that threatened neighbourhoods close to a university campus. Firefighters used helicopters and aircraft to bring the fire under control after a week of intense heat. The country has experienced multiple wildfires this summer as soaring temperatures and strong winds fuel the flames. This summer, wildfires have devastated forests and forced thousands of evacuations across southern Europe and the Mediterranean. Experts say climate change is increasing the frequency and intensity of such natural disasters, making summers hotter and drier. In recent years, the region has seen record-breaking heat waves, pushing temperatures well above seasonal averages and creating perfect conditions for wildfires to spread rapidly.
Iran has reiterated its support for a peaceful resolution between Azerbaijan and Armenia, calling for the acceleration of peace talks and the signing of a final agreement. At a press conference, Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baghei also emphasized Tehran's support for regional transit routes, while warning that any new corridor projects must not undermine Iran's strategic interests.
Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baghei said, Iran supports the establishment of peace and security in the Caucasus through the acceleration of peace talks and the eventual signing of a peace agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia. Speaking at a weekly press conference, Baghei stated, "We have always emphasized the need to expedite the peaceful resolution of disputes in the Caucasus between the Republic of Azerbaijan and the Republic of Armenia, and we reiterate the importance of this in the context of the peace agreement." Regarding Iran's position on transit routes in the region, Baghei said Tehran supports their opening, describing them as important mechanisms for contributing to the economic development of regional countries and expanding their trade ties. However, he also reiterated Tehran's long-standing concerns emphasizing that the expansion of transit routes must not in any way undermine national sovereignty or territorial integrity, nor alter the geopolitics or recognized borders of the region. Iran has repeatedly expressed concern over the proposed Zangezur corridor, which is intended to connect mainland Azerbaijan with its Nakhchivan enclave via a 43-kilometer stretch through Armenia's Syunik province. Tehran views the corridor as a potential threat to its own land access to Europe via Armenia and Russian territories. Meanwhile, President Masoud Pezeshkian, in a meeting with members of the Parliamentary Committee on Foreign Policy and National Security, underlined the importance of maximizing Iran's relations with its neighboring countries. He told MPs, all of Iran's neighbors possess considerable capacities for bilateral cooperation. We must increasingly activate these capacities in the field of mutual interests. Turaj Shirarilu, reporting for A News TV, Tehran.
Previously on the Azerbaijan-Iran relations surrounding the Zangezur corridor, we spoke to Fariz Ismailzadeh, Member of Parliament of Azerbaijan. Fariz explained what the potential regional influence and impact of the corridor might be.
We have heard some concerns in Azerbaijan coming from Iranian officials regarding the Zangezur corridor, but we would like to say that Zangezur corridor is a win-win project for all neighboring countries, connecting railway systems, connecting automobile roads. So it's a connectivity project, transportation corridor, which will benefit all countries. And here in Azerbaijan, we believe that there should not be any concerns about the political and economic motives of this project. Zangezur corridor will also benefit Iranians as well, because it will connect the railway systems of Azerbaijan, Armenia, Russia, Turkey, Iran. So this is a regional project, and this is something that all neighboring countries will benefit from. I believe that this will only enhance the economic and connectivity capacity of the regional countries. It will benefit Iran as well. I don't think that it will bring any damage to Iranian national security. It will only add to the connectivity potential of this country. Certainly with Azerbaijan, it will improve the connectivity, it will increase the trade. Also with Armenia, I think that this will also contribute to the peace in the region, which our Iranian officials have also advocated for. So I believe that this Zangezur corridor will bring benefit to all neighboring countries, and I doubt that this will be only serving in the interests of U.S., as some Iranian officials claim. It will be actually more advantageous to the regional countries and regional economies.
Kazakhstan's President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev arrived in Turkey for a two-day visit, where he met with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The two leaders signed agreements to strengthen bilateral cooperation. Our correspondent Ali Aziz reports.
Kazakh President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev arrived in Ankara late Monday evening and was greeted at the Esenboğa airport by President Recep Tayyip Erdogan himself, alongside top officials including Defense Minister Yaşar Güler and Communications Director Burhanettin Duran. The visit, held on July 28th until 29th, comes at the invitation of the Turkish leader and reflects the deepening ties between the two Turkic nations. One of the central events of the visit was the fifth meeting of the Turkey-Kazakhstan High-Level Strategic Cooperation Council, where both sides signed a series of agreements aimed at boosting cooperation in trade, defense industry, energy transportation, and cultural ties. In a joint press conference following the talks, both leaders emphasized that the strategic partnership between Turkey and Kazakhstan will continue to grow stronger. Among the key goals announced, raising the bilateral trade volume from $5 billion to $10 billion, a major economic target that both countries say is within reach through expanded cooperation. This year marks the 33rd anniversary of diplomatic relations between Turkey and Kazakhstan, a key milestone both presidents highlighted as a symbol of deep-rooted friendship and a shared strategic vision. As Ankara and Astana expand cooperation across key sectors, the visit underscores not only strong diplomatic ties, but also a long-term commitment to deeper regional partnership between the two brotherly nations. For A News, this is Ali Aziz, Istanbul, Turkey.
Relations between Georgia and the European Union have taken another hit. The latest sign of diplomatic strain comes from Lithuania, which has added 10 more Georgian officials to its visa sanctions list. As tensions mount, Georgia is pushing back against what it calls Western propaganda and is turning increasingly toward regional partnerships instead of Brussels.
Lithuania has imposed visa sanctions on 10 more Georgian citizens, banning them from entering the country. The list published by Lithuanian Migration Department includes members of parliaments and public officials. In response, Georgia's parliament speaker Shalva Papuashvili lashed out at Baltic leaders, calling their actions post-Soviet trickery and accused them of targeting Georgians like names drawn from the lottery machine. This is just the latest development in the deepening rift between Tbilisi and its Western partners. While Brussels criticizes Georgia because of its democratic backsliding and growing authoritarian tendencies, Georgian officials reject pro-Russian label as Western propaganda. The diplomatic language is hardening on both sides, but instead of shifting the course or seeking alignment with the EU, Georgia appears to be pivoting regionally. The government is deepening ties with neighboring countries, citing shared strategic goals. A key example is the Middle Corridor project, a growing trade route connecting Asia to Europe through the South Caucasus, which fuels Georgia's ambitions to become regional logistics hub. As EU relations cool, Georgia is betting on geography and regional cooperation to secure its place on the geopolitical map. It's Nini Nikolaishvili reporting from Tbilisi, A News.
That's all we have for now. Thank you for watching and have a lovely evening.